All right, that looks like that should be long enough. I'll go ahead and get started here. So, hello and welcome to Bug Free Productions. I'm Isaac, and today I am the bug snug on his rug. And we'll get started with some programming stuff today. If this updated correctly, it should be. It didn't update correctly. That's nice. Let me see if this fixes that. Will this fix it? Yep, there we go. Okay. Yeah, we're doing Unity, not Deep Rock. That looks a lot better. So, let's go ahead and take a look at what we'll be looking at today. As always, you can watch the demos live on Twitch, or you can watch them on the backlog of the YouTube, which would be Bug Free Productions as put there. I don't know what the R4M means, but that's what they gave me for a new address. And today we'll just be quickly looking over what the error was the other day, which just basically came into one thing wasn't connected, and then another thing was that I didn't have setups on enable yet because I didn't get that far. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. I'll switch over to this view and pull over to this view here. Let's pull there. Okay. And as mentioned earlier on the Deep Rock stream, we'll be looking at getting some Halloween things going. This week will probably be the last one that's not going towards Halloween thing, but we are going to start on some things that'll make a Halloween game funner or at least easier to make. So first, let's go over, and if you read the title, you can kind of see what that'll be. So let's go ahead and take a look at our code from that day. Not IK calculator. We will not be spending time on IK calculator today. Racer HUD. That's that program that I'm still working on. It's not quite ready. I keep finding little bugs and I'm like, I can't demo this yet. But I don't know, I'll show maybe a quick demo towards the end of where that IK is at and what it does and why. I think I figured out what the problem is with it, but I still have a few more things. And it's not necessarily with the IK, it's with I think it's just straight up with my rotation, how I rotate using transform, because it gets next to an object, and then since it's not forced to stay straight up and down the whole time, because it's different than the physics racer we've been building, it just doesn't want to do that. Any rate, so you'll notice first, energy rest service, we did set that up, that was all correct. The only thing that needed to be done was to connect it. Connect the two, so which was a serialized field on the racer HUD measurement, if I remember. No, racer HUD measurement, through back to racer. Update racer HUD. Probably better if I just go back to Unity and go to the whole bod, which is where we had to connect that, correct? Request, max energy, HUD, none. HUD energy, UI racer. which is UI. Okay, so yeah, we just had to link this to our HUD energy script so that he could call that something or other there. All right, let's do this. Open. Let's do edit script here. What was this guy again? I just need a quick recap. I didn't have time to go through it before. So we have racer services, RES. This was not serialized. Protected on enable, we get component racer energy services. So HUD energy. Um, we get a reference to ourself. That doesn't make any sense. RES equals get component racer energy service. Oh, this is a measurement. Yeah, so this gets the service because it's on the object with the service. Energy level update. If racer HUD not null. So this is HUD update. So he's just asking for, which could be, yes, this is it. Racer HUD. So it needs the HUD that it needs to communicate with. And if that's not null, then it does a thing. Pretty simple. And then let's go ahead and jump to back to the Unity. So that was the first thing that was wrong. That had to get connected, and that was just a small thing. And then if we went back to the racer HUD energy, so the HUD energy had to on enable get component. That's true. Update true. Somebody had an on enable that was important. Here we go. Energy level. Protective virtual change display energy level from the racer HUD. Energy level equals NL new energy level. So I wrote this, I believe, with it, but some of it's a little bit different. I think we had this much working. So this adjusted the bar and that worked correctly. Which was just simply adjusting it via adjusting the scale via a percentage of what the max versus what the is level is. Now we transform the local scale and we set the energy level, change energy level, and this is racer HUD. So I have a feeling it's HUD energy then. On enable, get component. So who received, was it racer energy services? On enable, energy services, I put it in there. Why? Okay, because energy service actually looks out. And it just looks to see if it has a little module that runs back to the HUD. I did it in this one, I think, because I wanted to make sure that everything happened in the correct order. Where if this line here didn't happen to run in before, this one ran, the information wouldn't be correct when it updated, so I think that's why I did that here. That must have been. So I just called this an on enable after I set up my variables on the energy service. And if this isn't making sense now, there's always you can always flip back to the old video on the YouTube and see specifically how what our last setup was. Just probably a good idea to always like check if something's not making a new video, to go back and check the previous one. I try and do a recap, but some things are just a little complicated to run back and remember. That's why we love comments. I might even do that here and just put run in to ensure accuracy. There we go. Save that up. Because that's just a useful comment in there. It's good to see how that works. What would be the next thing then? We're probably going to look at. Okay, so that's pretty much the energy thing. And let's go. So now that this runs right away, we follow this back, override void update, and if race are not equal null, we run this update. We run energy level set update. I think it was right on the HUD. Or was it? Yeah, and it doesn't require, because that one object runs that HUD update in the on enable. It gets called before the player sees the thing load in, so we don't have to actually worry about this thing's on enable, which works out nicely for us. But we did have to adjust this thing. So the reason the text wasn't getting written out correctly is because I just, in trying to type quickly to get through the demo, it ended up with this incorrectly. So energy level equals new energy level. We're just setting that thing that comes in. That's fine. The max level is also being passed in just so we can calculate that correctly. Text mesh pro not equal null. Text mesh pro dot text energy level dot toString. Since we know that this will be clamped to 0, we don't have to worry about if this is going to be okay. If this is going to be negative, I should say. So that won't ever be negative because we already clamped that in the energy service. So we don't have to worry about that. That's nice. So that's all set up and won't be a problem. So this exactly is what you would have to alter if you were following along to make the energy text work correctly. I don't remember exactly what I had in here, but I probably should have left it commented out. And that's another thing you can do. You can always leave like say you need to explain something to somebody. You can always leave in commented out code. And then if you have to explain it, it's like, well, I changed this and this is why, and you can go in here. And then also this is here for uncommenting if you want to roll back for some reason. And then you can just you can either roll it back and put this in place, or you could, you know, after a while, if you've decided, hey, we're never going to roll back to this, we can just go pop and delete that buddy, which we can do that way. Okay, so then let's go from there into a different thing. So with this energy working, and I'll demo it working, there's two things that I changed. It's not going to affect your guys' stuff if you're following along, but if we're looking at my Unity project, I do have inverse kinematics working with 360 zero gravity. That's one of the things I want to demo later. And I could show you, but so basically I got so far and that rig is no longer compatible with the assets I'm using. So you guys can continue with the robot. I just built too far ahead and it wasn't backwards compatible for the reason that um, I needed to change my camera and how my camera worked slightly, and it just reference wise it wasn't going to line up with that. I think I figured out a workaround. Oh wait, that's right. I can use this workaround. That's maybe that'll work. But sneak peek into where this project is at right now is so we lean and tween, and we have some stuff, and this is actually probably of note. There's a rigid body. By adjusting drag, you can adjust how much drag is on it while it's on the ground. So that if you're experiencing like slippiness, slippy controls, or anything like that, I need to get a straight on for this next part. But so you can always adjust your drag levels if your controls aren't feeling quite what you wanted. And there's the error that I had, so we'll just go back where it gets off the thing, and then I don't have any gravity to pull it back down, and I don't have any grounding to fix it. It's kind of problematic, but and then we're going up, and if you look, this is the zero gravity part of the test. So it does rotate, keeps the camera orientated as it goes into a full like upside down state. So that's all fixed on my end. Then we're gonna go to, but I think I can do this. I just didn't test it. Let's go to scenes and we'll go to sample scene is the one we've been working in. I did make some changes I need to save, so I'll save those. Player racer cam is the one I need to adjust because he doesn't have an IK, but basically the player body can be used in that field. I thought. Maybe it can't. Oh well, I'll work on that. I think I just need to change some code. I don't remember where the camera script is anyway. It's fine. Anyway, not dwell on that too long. We need to go in ahead and cover the topic, which is where it's going to be the spawning in Unity. So we're actually going to do something a little more complicated than just instantiate, which I'm sure anybody watching this has probably seen on like some form of Bracky's video, or did Mike might have had one. Anyway, we're gonna make a nice little pool. Um, yeah, we're gonna do some pooling. We're gonna do some spawning, and the way I like to do it is I like to use scriptable objects. No surprise. Um, this basically because I can go to the objects and be like, hey, we can just make a pool on the scriptable object. This object exists all the time, persistent across scenes, and we don't have the problem of, you know, duplicate objects and what have you, but, or not duplicate objects. We don't have to destroy an object every time. We can reuse objects. Um, and we can make it even more simplified if we just use consistent method naming where it's just like, okay, use, and then if it is instantiate, we have like on enable, it just does use, so it does like setup and then use right away. Um, or we create and then just call use, which is probably a simpler way to do it, because then the instantiation on enable runs up, and then you can hit use and it'll run the values and do stuff like that, which is it might seem really simple right now, but having a pool of objects that are reusable actually, if you're doing a multiplayer game especially, is going to save you a lot of time and effort. And if you're doing even like this one, we're just going to do one shot, right? Which if if we have a maximum of 8 racers, right? We really if we have a maximum of 8 racers, we really don't need to pool bullets and stuff probably. We might want to pool hazards or something like that. But when you do like endless runners, shooters, um, like if we had 50 players running around shooting 20 rounds a second, um, each one shooting 20 rounds a second, not taking into account reloads and all that stuff, obviously, but it would be a little bit more difficult and uh, would slow us down a little bit more, which is where I've actually seen some controllers that are like, hey, we didn't do pooling. Here's where you put the code in if you want to pool your own objects, because even though their firing system worked really well, it created and destroyed an object every time. And this is actually kind of a problem in the AR kit that I was using, where the image tracked object didn't reuse itself. It created and destroyed itself every frame, which is horrid on a computer. Now put it on your mobile phone that has like half the RAM and speed, and you see my pain there. So this is one way to keep that from happening. I had other delays and stuff to come to kind of eliminate that problem with the phone, but on here we'll create some pooling stuff so that we don't have a chance at losing too much. And tomorrow, not tomorrow, Thursday, these UI elements you see up here on both screens, I just did some setup for a UI, and we'll do some design UI demo stuff, including discussion about the not collections, colors and objects and hints and etc. So that'll be interesting. Um, because I actually learned a lot of this yesterday and today. That was basically what I was working on, was getting these little guys to run, or not run, but import the way I want and get ready to set up for my color design programming idea for reusability, and also just making it easier on artists so we don't have to um actually, let me just show you. It would have been an animation emoji. You see here how we got all this, Essentially, with this new system, I decided on, found, came up with, I don't know. This new one I've decided to use. There we go. Um, Basically everything that's not white is useless crap now, because I figured out a way to script color changes, and as long as the object is fully opaque white. So we have that. That's pretty good. I mean, that works pretty nice. Then the artist doesn't have to make all these or color change them in some application, which I already did by the time I figured this out, which is sad. But the new effect, you probably didn't even notice on the, if you watch the art streams, you probably didn't even notice that the emoji isn't still the same exact shade of purple. Well, I did change the color of the text, but everything else is exactly the same color. Same animation, and it's just a little bit different setup. So that'll be done. We'll do that Thursday. We'll get a look at that, which I think this is really cool. I like the progressive scan that I made, and then the way the color works is a lot more, in my head, a lot simpler, because everything in here is just a white shape or a text object, which, since I was doing a really simple HUD, was perfect. And this image, yeah. So, pooling. First idea of pooling is that we're going to need to go to our project. We might as well pull this up a little bit so we can see better. I'm going to need scripts, because the first thing we're going to do is make a script for our pooling. And I'll actually probably just call this pooling. This is the scripts folder, right? Yep. I'll make it here, and then I'll probably move it into a separate folder once I get it working. Oh wait, no. Folder. What's my folder gonna be? That's just gonna be pooling. And you can use generics. I never ended up using generics. Reason being, a pool that takes in a generic class and then uses that, um, like not a generic class, but subclass, doesn't quite work the way I want it to. Um, but we're gonna try a different way today. So let's get pooling. So the first thing we need is we need to create a C# script. And 1 second, please. Okay, better. Got some crap stuck in my nose, was getting a little bit nasal. There we go. Okay, so how does this work then? So we're probably gonna go to, now that I made that thing, because I remember. Okay, so I like to create a C# script, and we're gonna probably do this. So the generic pool can really take in any kind of class. But that's not exactly what I want to do, because I want the pooled object to actually have some functionality. So I do call my generic pool, which may be confusing, but that's the best name I could come up with it. So we have a generic pool. We have a C# script. Poolable. That's poolable. And then what I'll actually do is also create a C# script. No. Moving too fast. I don't move fast very well. Let's delete that one. That's left click, right click. Create a folder. And then what? So this is going to be for our factories. And what I like to do is kind of combine my pooling and my factory, because it yields simpler. So we'll do a C# script that is generic factory, factory. Then we're going to need this one, and we're going to need the pooling ones we just made. Mm. And if I wanted, I probably could have left that little quick action thing here. Usually when you first start a project, it'll have this open with something open over here with the file structure, and you can navigate doing that, but I didn't really want my whole file structure on display, so we don't have that here. Yeah, we got this in the code. And again, if you're doing YouTube demos, you might not always want to put this in here. But at the same time, I have, like, I do this in my code all the time because you have to know who to get a hold of and who develops something. So, and being that I'll probably sell this code after I finish sales on the game release, I might as well have it in there. Doesn't make any sense not to. Namespace of bug-free productions. And I started a new namespace tools because the art stuff was starting to take up some space, and I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to have it specifically to Arcade Racer. I'd rather have it in a separate namespace, not because of functionality or anything, but just because when I separate it out for the code, it might install better when I package it. Because then it might help me organize how I package things. So we go vars on here, because we will have vars, we will have methods, and then not sure what kind of ACCESSORS. I probably should take some more allergy meds or something today. Oh, here we go. Okay. Anyway, pool saved up. Or not pool. Poolable. Generic pool. The reason I didn't do just pool is because there is a pool type in both Unity and C#, I believe. So didn't want that problem to be a problem. And we got a little update. Got start. Don't want start or update or anything. Generic pool isn't even going to use mono behavior. Well, able is probably going to be abstract. And this kind of just depends. I think I'll leave it mono behavior. So I'll probably get rid of the abstract too. Just for testing purposes right now. Where generic pool doesn't exist in scene, so doesn't need to be inheriting any of that crap. So the idea is here in generic pool, we have a variable that is a pool, which would be a protected. Don't do private because then we have to rewrite everything we already wrote. And we couldn't serialize it later if we wanted for testing purposes or anything either. Well, we could actually. That's not true. What was the reason why I didn't use it? There was a reason. I can't remember right now. Protected. It would be poolable. 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 And that would be not a single object, but a collection. Are poolables. And let's not use let's not use this. And here's why. Because a list is easier to add to. A list of poolable. And then we can equal an empty list. Which is preferable to an array in this case because okay, which is preferable to an array in this case because we don't want an array that doesn't exist and then we can't assign to. This prevents reference issues because list obviously exists right now. Unlike an array that's not declared or whatever, it's a pain. And then we have methods. And what do what is the two things that a pool does? A pool pools objects and would unpool them. That's kind of where I did this for a little while I was learning how to do some of this stuff. Because poolable helps us to have methods in here that do things, right? Um, which isn't always it, it's complicated because how do we I should have left. Yeah, I could use more computer RAM. The thing is, when we pool, we either want this poolable object to be doing stuff to add itself to the pool or what have you, and then it just has things that it does, right? So it looks in the pool, returns an object, returns references for anything that's in the pool, and then wouldn't necessarily deal with anything adding it to the pool or removing it from the pool. Well, it would probably remove from pool when it serves an object because you're popping it out of the pool. So that's probably a bad example. Um, oh, actually, I don't like this either. Was it Q? I don't know how to spell Q. This is the one I like. Um, and you might say, why Q over list? Q is going to DQ something faster. It just is. Where we can just look at the first index of a list and pop it and do that, but we can just use the method DQ to pull this from a queue, which is kind of logically how I prefer to think of it and keep things written. There's nothing wrong with using lists or arrays or anything else. It's it, um, just a personal preference. So methods, um, so if we make a search function, so we want to look in the pool. So we would call this one public because we want our factory to be able to look in here and see if we have anything. So we want public void. We're not going to return anything. Now, why not, you might ask? Well, because I don't want to return something just in case I don't have anything in the pool. What I want to do is I want to create um, a method. So we'll just call this pool check. CHK is what I use for abbreviations usually because I have a lot of checks and I hate typing, I don't know, any more letters than I have to. So this guy's actually going to have a poolable, a poolable I think this was the other reason. I did use a fully generic pool when I did the other ones, which means you use like the something like that. So when you create the pool, you create a pool of these, and then the factory would have to figure out what to do with it. So then you run into the problem of you need many different kinds of factories, um, which you might end up with anyway. But um, with this, it's unavoidable. It has to be a separate factory every time, which can get exhausting in the fact that I have to rewrite all the code all the time. Even if I copy and paste it from one file to another, it's still irritating and should be the goal to avoid it. So we have a poolable, a poolable, a poolable just because we're dealing with a poolable, not necessarily what we know. And it's not going to be a normal, it's going to be a ref. Now, why a ref? Because out forces us to assign something, and if we don't have anything in the pool, we don't have anything to assign to this thing we want to return, which is the same reason we didn't use a return. So we use a ref. And what a ref allows us to do is we pass in an empty object, right? A null reference, basically. And with this null reference, we can either assign something to it or we cannot, because it's a reference that we can change. We don't have to change. So then when we're in our factory, we can look at it and we'll be like, okay, so it didn't give us anything. That value we went to hold is still null. So what do we do now? It's like, well, we just move on to the next part. We do an instantiation and we tell it the pool and we tell it to do this other thing, and it works perfectly fine. Um, which is the idea behind this. So there's your pool check. So what does this have to do? So basically I'll just throw an if statement in here. If p poolables dot count is so we can do that quick check. I was gonna do not 0 if it was not. Yeah, no, that's pretty much what I was gonna do anyway. So if that count is higher, then the apoolable is equal to poolables.dequeue, which takes care of removing it from the pool, putting it into this variable that is passed in as reference from somewhere else. So all of our code to run our pool, or to take an object out of our pool, is already done for us. The next one would be to do public, and this is going to be public. We'll do virtual too, just so future iterations can overwrite it. Void, and this one's going to be pool obj, and we're pulling an object. So what is that going to be? So pull in, and we're going to add this one. We can just do a poolable public virtual void poolable object poolable. And we're just gonna grab poolables dot enqueue poolable, and that's taken care of. So now this is in the queue, and our count is a normal size and all of that. You could, and Unity certainly did, you can get more ingrained in this, being that they do have a built-in pooling function. It has more things that you can change. So say I want to target creating 40 objects. I want them to always be held, the full 40 objects. And if I need more, I can create them, but I want to destroy them if I only want pool that amount of 40. certainly has things. It's a little more complicated and not as easily thrown into your own programming because I don't know. It's just harder for me to, at least harder for me to throw it into my programming because I don't remember that many steps. There's like 5 different steps that you have to do to be able to use it correctly, and I just don't remember that well. I remember this pattern. This is actually less lines of code than I've seen people use the Unity object pool with. So I'm in favor of doing something like this rather. Also, it like creates those. There's probably different settings. The one I seen used where you pooled them all up front and then used them. Which nothing wrong with that. It's just if I don't want to spend that on the startup process, and I'd rather just you'll see as we go. This is meant to save time, and it might have slight impact on processes during runtime, but it does save on initial load time, which is important because nobody wants to start a game and then wait for all the objects to be pooled and all that crap. That's why load bars take so long sometimes, and this is a way to I try to avoid that. But pool object, so this just pools and queues the object. Um, and then so what would a poolable object need to do? Well, I actually do keep a reference. So we'd go protected, and we'd probably make an accessor for this too, so that it could be set by factory. But generic pool, a pool, and we don't assign it. That's for somebody else to do. Specifically the factory. Um, Poolable might even have to have mono behavior just because we're going to incorporate it with factory pattern. So, or a factory item could inherit from poolable, whatever. Methods. So he's going to have to know what his pool is, and if he can pool himself. So we would do something like it would be protected because we don't want somebody else telling this object to pool himself. That would be kind of counterintuitive. Protected, so do something like pool, protected, virtual void, pool self, and then we'd probably have something like then we go to like generic pool if so if um, pool is not null, then we would pool dot pool object and just pass our self into it, and we're good to go. This being a mono behavior, if we leave it as a mono behavior, we could do, you know what, no, I like the idea of the factory item better. Yeah, yeah, that idea I came up with like 5 seconds ago, not even. We're going to delete this. We're going to go back, and we're going to save up. And why am I going to do the factory item idea? Because I have virtual methods in an abstract class. Yes. Why am I going to do that? Because it's going to make it easier in the long run, because this will pool correctly, all that stuff. Fun, 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 right? And then the factory, like a factory item is actually the one that needs to have the use, um, or reuse or whatever stuff on it. Because the pool, this is just needs to be able to add itself back to the pool, DQs, so we can have it do something on depooling, like coming out of the pool, but then that pool has to talk to this poolable object and have it use here. And just because we depool something doesn't mean we use it right away, right? So we might, for example, if you were pooling bowling balls, um, you might depool something, but then you might need to move it to a different position and stuff before you activate it, like make it visible and push it out the ball catcher, the ball return, right? So while use would be a good is a usable idea in this case, and the fact of that how we're going to be using it in Unity being that we need to do changes to it beforehand, um, we don't necessarily know all that ahead. So um, separating into a factory item might be helpful. Not only that, but then we have another layer where if we wanted to use poolable on something else that pooled differently, we could do that without having to worry about it, um, overwriting certain different things and having too many different pieces of code in here. I think the factory item is just going to be a little bit better, and there is no pure pattern like you can be a real purist about patterns, or you can how can I break them and use them in different ways to accomplish my goal. And this is going to be, wow, that's a weird overlap of text. But any rate, we're looking at this, right? So now what's our factory? I'm actually going to go back and make a factory item script. But before then, we can probably create a like the basic functions of the factory, which what does a factory do? It makes things. So what's this going to do? It's going to make things. Super simple. Accessors. Accessors. It might have accessors. I don't know. So anyway, what's the point of a factory? Um, it has to have something to produce. So we have a protected production. I'm gonna just call it, yeah, let's go make that class. I'm gonna confuse the heck out of myself if I don't go make that class. Let's go scripts, factory, create, um, factory item, factory item. Then we'll open factory item. What's the, oh, it was probably, let's go to the pool. Generic factory needs a factory item. Factory item. Factory item, which is going to be colon. That's not going to be decided yet. What we're going to do there is make a serialized field. Why would we use that? Well, because we might create, because the idea of a generic factory is not going to be a mono behavior. It's going to be a scriptable object. Scriptable object. And why is that? Okay, so if we think about this, the factory, generic factory, we have a factory item. Might rename this later because I am thinking of it in terms of scene. So I might rename it scene factory, not generic factory, because these are items I want to put in the scene, and they might work a little bit differently than if I was, say, creating a factory of classes with stats, like a bunch of stat blocks. Doing stuff like that. So I might rename this eventually. What was generic pool? Generic pool is going to go, I didn't give that a namespace yet. Namespace of bug-free productions dot tools. Ooh. Of tools, poolable is in tools. Did it add anything? What's in poolable? Generic pool? It did automatically add a using statement, which I don't want. Because they're in the same thing. Factory, this is also going to go in tools. Now, why am I doing this? And not why am I doing this, but again, the reason I'm doing this is so that when I eventually have this packaged and ready to ship as an asset or something, these prevent anyone else's naming to conflict with the code I'm working on. Because it will be, they'll have to go to bugfreeproductions.tools and get this guy. Which is a plus or a minus depending on how you're looking at it. They might also not need to do that much. They just need to use a using statement for bug-free production tools. And then they'll be able to use the reference as long as there's no conflicts, which is perfectly fine. But in any case, factory item, method. So this is going to be the create something method. So it's going to be probably public virtual void create item create item. So I had a better verb for that for some that I can't remember for some reason. Oh well. Um, Another thing it also needs is it needs a, this doesn't need to be serialized, but it needs to be a protected pool, protected generic pool. And why does it need a pool? Because when we create an item, we actually have to go to the pool. So first thing we do is we go, oh, that might have been why I did that. Because you can see in combining these things, it gets a little more complicated. Factory item is a factory item, right? Which is a poolable, which has those things. Yeah, it should be fine. I'm sure it's fine. Um, a a facts that's going to be factory item a fact is equal to null. And so we're going to create reference to return, create reference for the pool to return to, and we're going to check pool for item, right? For so we check the pool for a reusable item. What do we do with that one? So that's done by calling pool dot, and I noticed I didn't instantiate this. New generic pool, parameters of that, because this is a C# class, not a Unity mono behavior class. Just important to remember when we're doing this. Pool dot pool check. And we're going to pass in a fact. Now, why is this wrong? Well, this doesn't know that our factory item is in fact going to inherit from pool yet, from poolable. Poolable. And that's the automatic stuff that I don't always like to have. Namespace of bug-free protections dot tools. There we go. So we got all this stuff. And 10 slash. So that should all be good. Let's give a check on the one thing, make sure everything's still running good. Everything looks fine. Sweet. And then we go back to the other screen so I don't lose my sanity. Factory poolable. So now that that is inheriting from poolable, what does that tell us? Okay, so now a fact should pass in as a viable option, which the reason it's not is because I forgot one very important keyword of ref, meaning that a fact will be ref cannot convert ref bug-free productions tools factory item to ref bug-free productions. Factory item a fact equals null dot poolable. Did I inherit from poolable? Yes. Generic pool. Did I do something wrong here? Pool able, pool, ref pool, generic factory. Did I screw something up here? Abstract, which shouldn't affect it. Factory item, poolable, tools. That looks all good. Factory item, it's because, yeah, that's why it is. Pool able, a fact. That's what it is. So this might look a little dumb, but essentially we have a type poolable that is a factory item equaling null. Reason why is this pool will never be assigned anything that is not a factory item, which factory item also inherits from poolable. So this pool can do the pooling function of a poolable object doing that pool function. With that, even though we're only creating factory items if we still have nothing back from it. So that runs our pooling function because all we're really worried about is pooling and pulling from the pool. We're not super worried about um, doing things with that production of the item yet. Now we're starting that. So in the production of a factory item, let's comment again just to make sure we're going in the right direction. To create a factory item, we only want to use new only if none were pooled. Meaning if there's pooling, that means it was at the end of its function, so it's ready to be reused, right? Cool. Use new only if none were pooled. So if the a fact is not null, so checking to see that we received something, we do thing. reuse pooled item. Else, what do we do? Else we need to create a new one. So the creation of a new one would be to um create anyway, create new item. So we got that then. So how would we create and reuse an item? So this is where we're going to get into instantiation type things. So we'd reuse a pooled item. So these are factory items, both that would be reused, right? Not poolable objects, just factory items. So we come back to our factory item, correct? Now we're going to start defining what the heck we want this guy to do. Bars accessors. And with this factory item, what do I want to do? The idea is to, everything will be inherited from poolable. So none of the pooling stuff I need to worry about. What I do need to worry about is probably, so the factory should say, if we're reusing an item, so let's say if we create an item, right? We should create an item that is an instance of the prefab we have in that factory item. Oh crap, I just noticed. Poolable, actually there's an easy way around that. Oh, there's not. Hmm, well, poolable is just going to have to actually inherit from mono behavior. And I'll rename later if I have a problem. Because factory item has to have it in order to work the way we're looking at. But, I mean, it's still nice that it's a little more separated, but yeah, I guess it's still good that the methods are a little more separated, but it didn't make a huge difference. It just makes a small difference in usability, honestly. So vars is going to be a factory item, has a pool, it has everything from poolable, but what does it need in addition to that? Probably nothing variable-wise that I can think of yet. Might depend on what your item is. But the method has to be public because it needs a use that's not right. Use factory item public virtual void. So use factory item. And then this is where you'd pass in any arguments you need, all of that stuff. Oof. Ow, my shoulder. Okay, this is where you pass any arguments like position, such things as that. Should probably be a good thing. So let's say vector 3, vector 3. Use factory item, so we should have vector 3, a position, and we'll probably have a rotation, which would be, could be a vector 3, but I'd rather just use the direct quaternion. Quaternion. And there's also one other way that we could do this. We could just pass a transform into here and say, hey, you spawn this way, like from this transform point, like a firing point, which is where I usually use it from a lot. So I'd probably use it from a transform, honestly, which would have the quaternion rotation and the vector 3 position information of the object. Transform A, and we go T ATF, and then we need to do things um, should be position, position ish. Position and align. So TRA transform dot position equals ATF dot position. And transform dot rotation is equal to ATF dot rotation. Easier this way. So this is if it's reused, right? So you use a factory item, passes in that. Cool. Now why do we have this? Well, we can just call this every time we want to use it because it'll do everything from setup to hold if we need. And then we'll do something else to tear it down. Don't worry. Different day for that. Generic factory. So then if AFAC does not equal null, we just AFAC dot u. I'm gonna go copy paste. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, I'm just gonna copy paste. I don't know what happened there. What we got here? Hmm. Crap. So, because it's poolable, because it's only a poolable class described so far, we can't call this because it doesn't think that that's the type it is. But we can always get the component. Get component factory item. And because this is our pool for this specific factory, it can never be a type that is not what we instantiate, meaning a factory item. So dot use factory item which would be for default. Actually, even for default, I think I'll just create another variable here. So item, we want to mass produce. Here is the pool to store produced and here is the rotation want um b items produced, which is going to be a serialized field that is probably protected. Does it transform? It is not assigned at birth. Which would be what should we call it? Factory point. Hold. That's wrong. Because this is going to be a scriptable object. How is it going to have that? Sure, we can give it a reference to a transform, but then once it leaves the scene, we're going to be very sad and broken. So what we're actually going to do is we need to make this create item. Poolable facts, all this. This guy just needs to take in a transform of where to do the thing. So production point, probably call it something like that. Product info. That's not good. It will do spawn info, create info maybe. Create info, and we could make other objects that would do other things. You can always overwrite this later. And then we're just gonna put create info in there. Create info. So that guy gets passed into here, and then we just use it. So if it's not null, we just use the factory item, right? Perfectly fine. The fun thing comes into here. We should actually probably separate this before this. We should actually have something like a fact. We should have a factory item I don't know. I got nothing. No good ideas for a name on that one. Equals this. And this is just for the sake of error and making sure there are none. If fi is not null. There's no reason it should ever have a problem, but if for some reason something else fails and stops the frame from running the rest of the way through, and then we have a reference error that holds that info okay and acceptable. But yeah, and if you don't understand what I meant by that, you probably will if you keep going with Unity. Else create new. So else we create a new item, and that is going to be, yeah, I used to write back to this one if I created one, and I just don't think I want to at all. Because this guy should have a poolable, this guy, so like I said, we'll have to assign to this pool, so we could either make this public, or we could just go down here and make a getter setter. Um, which will be a public virtual, because I don't want to have to override it, public virtual. And it's going to be a public virtual getter setter, which is going to be a generic pool type, which is going to be capital pool, which is going to be get return pool. It's going to be set pool is equal to value. Now, why do we want that? Because we do want to pool ourselves. We let the pool pool us for us. We let the pool this class for us, meaning adding it to the pool, but we do have to make that method call. So we have to know what pool we belong to, which would be determined by the factory that produced us. That's a factory item, not the factory I wanted. So we create a new item that we can create a new item, and that new item is going to be, so it would be like instantiate instantiate um, instantiate a factory item. So the way instantiate works is we have the prefab of the thing we want to instantiate. So instantiate this prefab that we have referenced up higher in our scriptable object. It looks like we'll get through the coding part, and then I'll test it off screen and let you guys know if it fully worked and demo it on the next Tuesday. But we're almost done with the code part of it, which is exciting. So instantiate a factory item. We have the position. So we need the position, which what would the position be? It would be create info dot position, and we could use a quaternion identity for the rotation. But if you think about that, that's going to be 0, 0 rotation of world space. So equivalent to always facing north. If you view the world axis as that being north, which isn't going to work very well. So I would just pass in create info again dot rotation, and you might not have to be actually doing that. I think this is actually faster than what I had. So we should have factory item original, vector 3 position, quaternion rotation. So it'll have the same rotation as this, which you could do quaternion identity and then set the rotation separate. Seems kind of redundant to me these days. I used to do that for more precision, big air quotes, but I think this will do fine. And this is actually slimmed down a lot from my firing factory, which I'll probably have to adjust to be more like this because it is a mess. In no small part because it has projection lines associated with it, so makes even more problems. Or trajectory lines? Trajectory lines. Yeah, which we'll probably go over, but not in this one because the way it's shooting is already going to be hard enough, and I don't want to make it more difficult than it needs to be. So this thing, so then this is all set. So we instantiate that. And then what do we want to do? We actually want to do one more thing. So game objects. So I'd probably go ngo for a new game object is equal to instantiate to Unity engine.gameObject. Cannot tool factory item. Why not? Right. Because that's not technically a game object. Oh. This is going to need to be a game object. Game object, because this is going to be a problem. Which that's not going to need to be there. Okay, so the reason, yeah, it was producing a factory item, which it would create a component, but there wouldn't necessarily be a component for it to be associated with. So it would probably either create a new one or just error, which would be bad. So we changed this factory item to a game object, and then factory item here. I want to get rid of this line because that'll also be a problem. It was just left over. I thought I'd use Control X instead of Control C. Instantiate factory item position create info. Okay, so this is still all good. And then the reason I saved this is because I want to go. Hold on. Because if I call the method on a null reference, it would be a problem. But if I call a non-null reference, I call it on something, yeah, I don't know. We'll just do the extra locking to be sure. We're going to need a reference for the factory item. Factory item. Would that be right? Yeah, because it's not. Yep. Because it enters the if statement, does this declaration, uses all this information. um, and then discards it before the if else runs. So this is fine. NGO get component factory item. And then if fi not null, we do a thing where we fi use item factory create info. Yeah, right? Cool. So we are still instantiating it at the point anyway with the rotation by default, and then entering use factory, and use factory can determine on from there what object wants to do, right? Cool. So this should all work. It's 46 after though, and I don't know if I can hook all this up and test it in say 10 minutes anyway. So what we're gonna look at is probably doing that next Tuesday, doing the test, and I don't know, but this should be a nice little factory and pooling setup to use for anything, especially spooky horde mode games where it's like spawning a bunch of skeletons or zombie shooters and stuff like that. That should work really nice for both your creatures and your um, both your creatures and your ammunitions. Um, which we'll probably go over ammunitions and stuff a little bit, do some basic stuff. Rewriting my animation script or ammunition script for that. Um, but I mean, I think this is pretty nice, and it's worked pretty good for a couple of projects I've done now. This is actually a little more intelligent than the last one I built, as it goes with programming. Um, but it's very nice. And then we have um, yeah, it's just very nice. A little more work than setting up than just using a built-in function, but it's gonna feel a little bit more adaptable because you know where those base classes are, you know how they work, and you know um, what to overwrite where, and you can leave it so that all the other stuff still runs. Um, and yeah, I did this for all of my ammunition and my trajectory lines. It's just two different factories. Where this one I could probably get away with only using one type of factory and creating two different, you know, in the SCOs. Um, we probably do have time to go for me to show you how easy this is though. So, oh, there's one thing I forgot. I inherited from scriptable objects. Yes, true. And I can't use this unless I put in a create asset menus tag. That would have been a disaster. So we have that, and then we have create asset menu, and I have file name is equal to, this is how I like to do it. I just go grab my factory, generic factory. And I am going to rename this actually. Um, Actually, no, I won't. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. But then menu name is equal to quotes, and then yeah, because I like to have all my scriptable objects that I personally made all in one thing. I probably go like BFP SCOS or something like, yeah, so meaning bug free production SCOs. This works just fine. For learning people still learning Unity, it works just fine. I haven't had any problems yet. I just say, what would my default name be? Generic factory. Scriptable objects, generic factory is the menu path. Oh, I do want to rename this actually, because every SCO gets the SCO extension. I'm just gonna go Control C that now, enter, and that'll change it everywhere. But I want to paste it in on the ends of these. Just so that I know it's an SCO without having to go into the code and find out what the heck's going on. Which would be a pain. All of your classes should at a glance tell you what the heck is going on. And there. We're actually going to just go over to Unity and I'll show you how easy this is now. So this is in the factory, and I create a folder for factories. And we open, and if I right click create, scriptable objects, generic factory, SCO. Here we are. And our generic factory has a slot for a factory item that we would create. We would still need one more class to actually make all of this run, because something has to tell it to produce something. It's just a backend factory. It doesn't like call for where to put something. But that's pretty easy. We can make a mono behavior that just does it on the start to test it, which is probably what we'll do. It'll just make it easier. Um, but yeah, so that is all for today. Check out next week when we actually test this and move on to something else. I haven't figured out what, so anybody with a uh, suggestion or anything, or something you're working on that you would like advice with, um, remember to drop it in the uh, where any chats are found, like chat, comments, what have you, on YouTube or on Twitch. I'll probably get my website up here as well, just so that people can check that out and get a look at that, because it'll have some DeviantArt links and stuff. Or maybe I'll try and get DeviantArt up there instead. We'll see how that goes. We'll have the UI art discussion, kind of more of a topics stream, be tomorrow, not tomorrow, Thursday. And till then, have a good night, have a bug-free night, and we'll see you later.